The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
From the territories to Titan Towers to TNA and all points in between, he's seen and done it all. And now, he's here to share the real story behind wrestling's biggest moments, controversies, and characters. The MLW Radio Network presents Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, I'm excited to be back, man. We got a lot of great feedback after our Montreal episode last week.
You know what? I'm so excited. I get humbled, as I've said before, how many people are listening to the show. I love the feedback, positive and negative, and I hope that we're pleasing our audience out there.
Well, I'm excited to be a part of this one. We had a lot of fun last week with kind of an impromptu poll that we just kind of brainstormed and thought, hey, this would be fun. And the people spoke, and they wanted to hear about Montreal. And I know when you see that, you think, not this again. But I feel like we had a different approach. I had fun with it, kind of talking about what led up to the situation that happened. And we did it again this week. We did it during Raw, and we're going to try to make that a habit. We're going to do it every week during Raw to kind of take a poll and let you guys dictate, what do you want to hear next? And you voted this week, and now we're going to one of your favorite topics to rant about, the Brawl For All.
Well, it's my favorite topic to rant about because I get to bitch and moan and complain. So apparently that's what I do best.
Well, let's address something else you wanted to kind of introduce into the show, is you wanted to address some of the questions and some of the feedback that we get through social media about the previous week's topics. So let's go ahead and address anything and everything that you would like to talk about based on the reaction we got from social media about Montreal. I guess number one, are you saying that Bret Hart is a liar?
Absolutely not. And, people, no matter what you say, they're going to twist your words and make you say whatever it is that they perceive that you said. But no, I never said that Bret Hart is a liar. I simply said is people that have read different things or heard different things from various sources, including books written by people, they take that as fact. And you have to take all of those things that are written and reported with a grain of salt, because they're not always 100% accurate and actually factual. So somebody had mentioned about Bret's contract and what have you, and they're simply reporting on what was written in a book or what was written by a dirt sheet writer that really has no knowledge of the situation other than what they heard and or were told. So you have to keep those things in mind, and also keep in mind that as I'm going through all of this, I'm giving you my opinion. I'm giving you my take on the things and how they affected me at the time.
20 years later, it's worth mentioning.
20 years later, right.
It's 20 years later with no research. We're just sitting down freestyling, and then, people want to pick it apart, which I get. That's what makes this fun, so I'm not complaining about that. Specifically, though, let's dig into what you're talking about. When we're talking about the contract issue with Bret, there was supposedly, and Bret did write in his book, that he had creative control on his way out. So the last 30 days of his contract, whenever he was leaving the WWF, he would have creative control, as if any of that mattered. Vince was still going to do what Vince did. There's a lot of other people who question, hey, are you saying that you thought Vince would, or Bret would steal the title? And when they say title, I think they mean belt. I don't think anybody's really concerned about a $5,000 set of metal plates and leather. It was more so the title of champion. So if you leave undefeated, then you're the real you take that lineage with you in kayfabe land, not like you legit stole an item. You just left the champion. Is that fair to say? Sure
it is. And it's about the brand, and you've invested so much in the brand and the championship and the person behind it. Again, you got to get your investment back, and that's just good business, and it's simply business. It's nothing personal, and it's something that Vince had to do and something that he did to protect all of us.
A lot of people get caught up on what their perception of the show was in terms of the perception that you and I, you specifically, of course, you're the star of the show. I'm just the button pusher, took Vince's side, so to speak, as if to say that there was a side to take instead of us just talking about a situation. So to clarify, you do believe that Vince backed up on his word when he gave Brett that contract, and because he was not able or willing to honor that contract. And then that led to Brett's decision. It's not as if Brett is just a bad guy for the sake of being a bad guy. Something unfortunate happened, then something else unfortunate happened.
Exactly. And, frankly, it was a situation where the situation changed. Vince was not able to afford him, and Vince looking out for Brett. And this is how I see it. Vince looking out for Brett gave him an opportunity to negotiate with the opposition, with WCW at the time, to get himself a better deal. So initially in the negotiations, when they made the 20-year deal, it was about money. It was about getting a better deal. And Vince saw this as an opportunity. I can't afford that right now. So I'll tell you what, you can go back to WCW, see if there's interest, and get yourself a great deal. And if you can do that, and I can help you do that, more power to you. So it was twofold. Hey, it's helping Vince in that he's going to lose that huge chunk of money from the payroll, but it's also going to help Brett, enabling him to get reportedly, more than 3 times the money that he was making on a yearly basis.
So it's a really good situation financially for Brett. Lots of people, online are confusing the kayfabe character of Bret Hart and his career versus the person who actually had to file taxes. And the person who filed taxes did a lot better than people maybe imagine in this deal. As far as did Bret sue Vince over this?
I don't think so. I
didn't think so either.
I never heard of that. No.
I just wanted to be sure. Real quick before we talk about this much more, because I know we want to get to Brawl for All. There was a debate as to if the roles were reversed and Shawn was Bret, would Vince have screwed Shawn, or because of their personal relationship, would he have agreed to the schmoz finish?
If Shawn were leaving?
Yes.
Well, if Shawn had refused and Shawn were leaving, I would imagine that Vince would have done the same thing.
I thought so too.
I mean, that's, people forget that part of the endearing part of Shawn and Vince and their relationship happened to be Montreal, and Shawn willing to do what was a very difficult thing to do in playing his part in that whole deal.
Well, so this is what makes this show fun. We get into great detail, and then we're going to follow it up each week and get into more great detail.
How about the guy? Hey, I'm sorry. How about the guy? Because you and I discussed this off air after the fact, that commented about a Rick Rude and Jerry Briscoe tussle.
Yeah.
And never happened. Rude and Briscoe were good friends throughout their career, and absolutely, positively, 100% did not take place.
No issue.
So I don't know where that came from or how that ever came about.
No physicality with Briscoe or Bret either, correct?
No.
The only physical stuff that we've heard about is all we've heard about, and that's Bret and Vince, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so that's what makes this show fun. We want your input on what the topics we should cover should be, and that's really easy to do. Just throw us a follow on Twitter @Prichard Show. Every Monday night during Raw, we're going to put up a poll, and you can nominate stuff in between now and then just using #LoveToKnow. But it's all going to happen next Monday during Raw. Check out @Prichard Show, and we'll have the topics up there. The poll will end a few minutes after Raw, and then that's what we'll cover next week. This week, we're doing the Brawl for All, and by the time you've heard this, we would have had the AMA last night on Squared Circle on Reddit. It's probably the premier forum to go to for all your wrestling talk. And last night, Mr. Bruce Prichard did his AMA. So overall, what'd you think, Bruce? Was that something you ever imagined you would do?
Absolutely not, but it was a lot of fun, and I got to tell you, you know me, and I never thought I would enjoy doing the podcast and interacting with the audience as much as I have. It's been a blast. So, yes, it was a lot of fun.
So go check out our friends at Squared Circle on Reddit. See what all Bruce had to say there. And quick shout out to our great friend, Mr. Clint Beckley, who recommended the AMA and helped put that together. And I'm sure you'll be entertained. It will not be something you'll need Ambien for when you're done. How do you feel about that, Bruce?
Well, I hope not, because, I don't have enough to share.
Well, I like that, but you do have plenty of knowledge to share. And on the other side of the break here, we've got what happened when the WWF did Brawl For All in the summer of 98. We'll be right back on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. All right, leatherbydan.com. We actually talked about this last week to kind of commemorate that football season was kicking off, and you and I are in a fantasy football league this year. But now the draft is behind us. How do you feel about your team, Bruce?
I feel like that championship belt that you have in your office is coming home to Texas around my waist.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but to be the man, you've got to beat the man, and you're going to feel like the man at leatherbydan.com. If you've got an opportunity to own one of these belts, you should really take a look at it, and you can use it for pretty much anything. We're talking sales organizations, we're talking weddings, we're talking fantasy football leagues, boxing, MMA, wrestling. No matter what the situation is, he can make one custom for you. This is not one of these Shop Zone mass-produced Chinese replicas. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess, in theory, but this isn't made in China. This is made in America by a man. I'm telling you, the man is Dan. You need to go to leatherbydan.com. What's your favorite belt over there right now, Bruce?
Well, I got to tell you, my favorite belt is the fantasy football from 1FMC, by God, and that's the one that I'm going after. But no matter what you're going after, I guarantee you leatherbydan.com can make it 100% original, unique, strictly to you. It only takes 12 weeks. I don't know of anybody else that can deliver a custom handmade leather belt this quality in such a short amount of time. They even got payment plans for you, and couldn't be a nicer guy to deal with.
I can't say enough nice things about Dan. I've done business with him for years now. I am a belt collector. Dan has been very integral in the hobby. He's made it easy to afford these belts and to get custom designs. When we're talking about a wait time, you need to appreciate he's talking about designing a belt, making the plates from scratch, making the belt from scratch. It's all handmade. It's right here in America. You can't get a better quality product than what you'll see from leatherbydan.com. And remember, a really short wait time and payment plans, you owe it to yourself to go check out leatherbydan.com. You can be the champ today. All right, Bruce, I think it's probably pretty obvious to everyone listening right now that I am not a professional broadcaster. But I think you can vouch for me on this. I do know a thing or two about saving people money. Is that fair to say?
Oh, without a doubt.
First Family Mortgage is the full-time gig for me, and I would love to help you save some money on your next home loan, whether you're looking to buy a house or refinance your house. First Family Mortgage can hook it up and make it easier than you ever thought possible. And I'm specifically talking to you if you're in a current loan. You know, a lot of folks just kind of set it and forget it with their mortgage. Well, it's not a rotisserie chicken. It's your biggest piece of debt. It's time to check in on it. It's time to get a better deal. And I'm talking to you if you're in a 30-year loan. What does the end of your loan look like? A lot of times people don't think about that. They just want to know, when's my payment due? How much is it? What's the interest rate? That's as far as they get. How old are you going to be when you pay your house off? How old are your kids going to be? Is that mortgage payment going to impede your ability to pay for your kids' college tuition or help them with cars? Are they going to get saddled with student loans because you've still got a mortgage? Think about what the end of your loan looks like. And if you don't know the month and year you're going to be debt-free, might be time to go ahead and check out 1fmc.com. Get yourself a quick quote. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, and we know how to make it easy to do. Isn't that right, Bruce?
Without a doubt. But what if they have credit cards they need to pay off?
Well, we can help you with that too. That's worth mentioning. You get to skip a couple of house payments. We'll even help you knock out some credit card debt. No matter what your situation is, First Family can make life a little bit easier, and it all happens right now at 1fmc.com. NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. And now, back to more Something to Wrestle With. And now it's time for the main event here on Something to Wrestle With Bruce Prichard. This is what you really tuned in for. It's our segment we like to call What Happened When? And this week we're going to go back to 1998, and we're going to talk the WWF in the summer of 98. Bruce, what happened when you guys booked the Brawl For All? I've always been kind of confused by this, and I can't wait to get the real scoop. If you're not familiar with the concept of what Brawl For All was supposed to be, tell everybody what that was, Bruce.
God, the absolute worst idea in the history of the business is exactly what the hell it was.
Do you really think it's the very worst?
It's up there. Yeah, it's up there. As far as, especially coming from a creative point of view, I thought it was horrible. I thought it was horrible then. I thought it was horrible when it took place. And hindsight being 2020, it's even more god-awful than I even imagined.
Well, okay. Well,
I'm going to point fingers in this one.
You know, I'm looking forward to this because this is something that you have kind of been fired up in conversations with me about, but you never really did get into great detail. So we're really going to talk about this maybe in more detail than anybody has ever done before. Is that fair to say that we're going to do that today on what happened when?
Well, you're definitely going to get my point of view and my opinion on it. It was a debacle, man. It was, in my opinion, a very ill-conceived concept, a very ill-conceived idea, and the end result was disastrous in many ways for the company.
Well, let's, you know, one of the things that I know you love and hate about the show, you hate the rumors and innuendo, but man, you love shooting them down. So do you want to kind of tell everybody how this came about, or can I go ahead and fire some theories off and then you set the record straight?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is somebody did an article on the Brawl For All recently and talked to several different people, some of whom were involved, some that were not. And in the article, and I guess over time, the creator and the person whose idea it was for the Brawl For All, Vince Russo, had made a comment that he came up with the Brawl For All as a way to shut John Layfield up, JBL up, because Layfield allegedly had made a comment. I say allegedly, trust me, John probably made the comment. If this were a real bar fight, hell, I'd be the only one standing. And Russo came up with this idea.
Do you believe that?
Do I believe what?
That JBL thought he was the baddest dude on the lot?
I would hope so.
Good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure you weren't backing up on that, because I think most of the guys on some level think they're...
That's my point.
Yeah.
I think every single guy that entered the Brawl For All felt they were the baddest dude. And I think that a lot of us that had friends that were a part of it felt that each, you know, that there were a lot of tough guys. Everybody that entered it was a tough guy. But when you add rules to a fight, all of a sudden that's a whole different situation. And the guys weren't boxers. They weren't necessarily amateur wrestlers. Some had boxing backgrounds. Some had amateur wrestling backgrounds. Some had no backgrounds at all other than being professional wrestlers and, you know, being reputed tough guys.
So to set the record straight here, Layfield and Cornette both say this was a Russo idea officially.
Russo says it was a Russo idea.
What does Bruce Prichard say?
It was a Russo idea.
Okay. Is that why you hate it so much automatically?
Well, it's not that I hate it because it was Russo's idea. Russo had some good ideas too. But this has to top the list of one of the all-time worst ideas in the sports entertainment enterprise ever.
But you don't believe that it's that level of a bad idea because it was Russo's idea.
I don't care whose idea it was. Anybody that would have come up with that idea to shut up a loudmouth in the locker room that would put that many talent at risk of serious injury for what?
Well, okay, let's talk through this. This seems like a long time ago now. But around this time, especially on cable television, there was an influx of tough man contest programming. FX at the time was running these and doing pretty well with them in the cable ratings. And so through a lot of that television, they started popping up all over the country. I remember this being a pretty common thing, that seemingly has gone away a little bit now with the popularity of the UFC. Guys who may have once upon a time participated in tough man contests then decided, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to learn jiu-jitsu if I'm going to really get in here and do some of this. But I'm curious, you know, this is a time when you guys are trying to be very competitive with WCW. You're looking for ratings. You're willing to take chances. In 1998, the WWF was doing stuff they've never done before. They would go on to do great things that I'm sure we'll cover later, giving birth to a hand, Katie Vick, lots of stuff that wouldn't have existed not too many years prior to that. But when you're sitting around the room, I assume there's some sort of a booking room or there's some sort of a writer's room or whatever you guys called it. Number one, what did you call that room? Number two, who was in it? And number three, what was the reaction from everybody when the topic was broached?
Well, first of all, at that time, I guess you would call it the dining room in Vince's house.
Okay.
Is where a lot of the creative took place. And at this time, I was focusing a lot more on talent relations and the developmental process and wasn't as involved in creative. I was at an arm's length and wasn't there on a daily basis. So as far as, my involvement in that at the time, it was from a talent relations standpoint, and it was initially brought to me by Vince Russo. And I told him when he first brought me the idea that I thought it was one of the stupidest, worst ideas that I'd ever heard. And I explained to him all the reasons why I thought it was a bad idea. That in the middle of a entertainment program where everything is scripted, you want to have a legit shoot fight in the middle of it. So explain to me how you're going to tell everybody, okay, all this other stuff that we're doing with the big stars, the guys that we're telling you are badasses and really, tough guys and all this, that's all bullshit. But this stuff right here for these matches, this is real. I don't know how you do that in the context of a entertainment television.
Well, let me
where
ask
everything
this.
is scripted.
In fairness, at the time, you guys, quote unquote, shooting on each other in interviews was growing in popularity, and some of the lines were blurring between storyline and reality. So I understand introducing the physical aspect of this does change it, but I'm just saying hypothetically,
there's a difference. Those shooting comments you talk about were scripted.
All of them,
so
all the
blurred
time.
The lines by scripting the lines to be blurred. We didn't go out there and just say, hey, here's a microphone, say whatever you want to.
But this is also an era where you guys are hitting each other as hard as humanly possible over the head with chairs. Can we just agree it was a different time?
We're not hitting each other over the head as hard as humanly possible with chairs. They're controlled hits, and no, they're not as hard as you possibly can.
Okay.
They look that way because it's entertainment and they're good at what they do.
I'm just going to move on out of that part. Let's go to something else. So when Vince Russo brings this to you, you guys don't actually do this until the end of June. That's when the first round of matches happen, and we're going to cover those. But when would this idea first have been brought to you? I know it was 20 years ago, just freestyle. Did y'all talk about this in April or May? Or does it not come up until June and then, hell, we're doing it next week type deal?
You know what? Essentially, it pretty much came up, and we were doing it within a couple weeks.
Okay, so when it comes up, I assume at some point around a dining room table, around the pool, wherever you guys are, there's a conversation for who the participants are going to be. How does that come about?
I tell you, Russo came to me and pitched me the idea and gave me a list of everyone that they wanted to be in it. And the idea behind it was that I had to then get on the phone and pitch this idea to the talent that were being requested to be a part of this deal. Do you want to go in and do you want to have a, quote, shoot fight, a real fight, and explain the rules to them with your other competitors? The winner gets more money and moves on in the tournament with the opportunity for more money. The loser gets X amount and you're eliminated from the tournament. So, again, I made my feelings known, and as I can do sometimes, I made them very colorfully and very loudly known. And, got back and I got the phone call about how negative I was and the fact that I was poo-pooing and shitting on someone's idea. And I wasn't necessarily just poo-pooing the idea because of who it was. I didn't. As I said, Vince Russo had some great ideas and was a creative guy. But this particular idea, I did feel was horrible. I was paid for my opinion and to give my honest opinion and not just say, oh, yeah, no, that's a great idea. I think it's wonderful to put our working talent that are entertainers into a real life situation where they can get hurt and our tough guys end up that we portray on TV as tough guys, storyline wise, may end up to be portrayed as not all that tough. So I was tasked with the job of having to sell this to the talent. So I put my salesman hat on. And once I was given my marching orders, by God, I'm going to be positive about it. And I'm going to do everything I can to, you know, sell that ice cream to the Eskimos.
So let me ask this, and there's no real polite way for me to ask this without seeming like a real asshole, so I apologize in advance. But when you look at the guys who actually competed in this, with the exception of eventually Bradshaw and a few years prior, Hawk, all of these guys are for the most part underneath guys. Now, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I have great respect for everyone in professional wrestling. It takes a full card to make an entertaining night, et cetera, et cetera. I don't mean that ugly. I am just trying to say that you guys weren't trying to put The Rock and Stone Cold and The Undertaker in this. You guys were looking to try to make
guys, okay, that wasn't me.
I don't want to hear that. You just said you were picking the guys.
That was direction that was given, and it was an opportunity. It was kind of looked at as a vehicle to take some of those guys, and that's fair. That's a fair assessment, what you just said. So it was an opportunity to take those guys that were not at the top of the card and elevate them and give them an opportunity to shine in a different light.
So here's my question, and this is the ugly part. If you know they're underneath guys and you know they're not top guys, then if one of them gets blasted and gets, you know, to made like not such a tough guy on television and therefore diminishes value, how does it really hurt the company?
Well, because you got a man down. You got guys down that were seriously injured.
Then you cut him.
You got Dr. Death Steve Williams, who was a top guy that was coming in to the company that we were hoping would be a top guy that we could draw some money with.
So let's talk about that. You brought him up, and I'm really excited to talk about this because lots of rumors and innuendo, as you say here. What's the real story on how Dr. Death came into the company? I remember in 1998 I'm from Huntsville, Alabama, of course, for everyone listening. Not that you need to know that. It just makes sense for this story. Raw was
you're from Jersey.
Raw, yeah, can you tell from my accent, bro? So Raw's in Birmingham, and just standing in the middle of the crowd is Dr. Death Steve Williams, just wearing a T-shirt, no one bothering him at all. I don't think anybody recognized that's who it was. I went over, introduced myself. He hadn't yet made his debut. So that told me, hey, he's hanging around. He's going to be coming in. Was this the vehicle that you guys used to sign him? Was it a way for someone to slide him a slightly better deal? How was he presented as being someone who should participate in the tournament if we are at the same time putting guys like 8-Ball and Scorpio and Bob Holly and Savio Vega, again, not disparaging, just saying if he was to be positioned as a top guy, there's lots of rumors and innuendo that he's supposed to walk through the competition and then be programmed against Stone Cold Steve Austin for a big payoff at a fight. Kind of clear up how he comes into the tournament and what all that looked like.
First of all, Doc was already under contract. Okay, so we had already signed Dr. Death to a contract, and no, this was not a part of the deal to bring Doc in and or to be a part of. So we had Doc under contract. It was a way for Russo, I think, looked at it as a way to introduce Doc because Dr. Death had been touted as, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, as the toughest guy walking the earth. And Steve Dr. Death Williams in his day was one of the toughest men walking the face of the earth. And that's when Doc was young and in shape, and Doc was a badass, legit.
And you were with him in Texas. Tell everybody about that because you guys were together for a little while in UWF.
Just, I consider Steve Williams, he was a good friend of mine and a wonderful, wonderful human being. But you talk about a legit badass athlete, played football, wrestled in college at the University of Oklahoma, and there wasn't much athletically that he couldn't do. But Doc had been out of that competitive game for quite some time now that he's coming into the WWF at the time. And, Doc coming into this was pretty much an odds-on favorite to win the damn thing. So I think Russo was looking at it as a way to introduce Steve Dr. Death Williams. I know JR was looking at it, that there was no one else, I think, honestly, that Jim really even considered, that could win the thing if Doc were in it. And Jim was a big proponent of Dr. Death Steve Williams. And you look at the competition, to your point, of the guys that did agree to do it. And again, back to your point, of the talent that was asked, those are the guys that agreed to do it.
So,
and
let me ask you this. You mentioned it, and I want to get on it before we get too far down the road. Jim Ross has a great relationship that everybody who listens to this probably already knows about with Dr. Death Steve Williams. And you, at times, can do phenomenal impressions. I want you to, if you can you be a little over the top? We're not saying this actually happened. We're just saying, let's be a little over the top and let's have fun with good old JR talking to you guys about how he feels Dr. Death will do in this tournament.
Well, ain't nobody else. Doc's a man. If you want somebody to win this thing, walk through a wall, that's Dr. Death Steve Williams. See that wall right there? He'll walk through it. He'll beat everybody in that tournament. They know that. Ain't no discussing it. But Jim, a passionate guy. And I love Jim Ross to death. But again, it's nobody really knew. We didn't know what the hell we had. And going into it again, it's like if wrestling, if wrestling were real, so to speak, professional wrestling, sports entertainment, there's a lot of us that never would have been able to get into the game. Okay. I ain't no tough guy. So it's like, it just wouldn't have happened. So you have different people, we asked Shamrock to be in it, and Ken had no interest in being in it because Ken Shamrock wanted to fight.
I got to talk about it. I need to talk about it. You guys have, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I wasn't sure if you wanted to get into it. Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock, 2 UFC Hall of Famers, 2 innovators of MMA, 2 legit badasses. Shamrock's not in it at all. He pulls out, or doesn't ever.
No desire
agree
to be in it at all.
Well, and why would he if he's already been branded as ABC's?
I agree with him.
Yeah.
I'm not disparaging anybody that didn't want to be in it.
I think Dan Severn is one of the nicest human beings that have ever lived.
Oh God, yes.
However, he, if he has
come on, Conrad, don't be scared.
He has the personality of a UPS truck.
Okay.
And I can't imagine a situation where Vince McMahon is okay with the result that winds up Dan Severn versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at a pay-per-view.
Well, okay. See, again, you're going on rumor and innuendo that the winner of this was going to be catapulted into a program with Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was never the case.
What was the goal then? If the goal was not to level the guy up, what was the goal?
Well, to level the guy up. But again, that takes stages, and you see what you've got.
Okay.
But that was never okay. The winner of this goes on to Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was never set in stone. That was never the.
So the plan was to not really make a guy with this. Let's just see if we can't hurt them all, but not quite get them to Austin's level.
Well, no, that's what happened. But I would definitely hope that wasn't the plan. It wasn't a good plan. Let me put it that way.
So,
and having to convince these guys to come in and do it wasn't the easiest thing in the world. But also at the same time, I played to their egos.
Sure.
And just said, hey, man, here's an opportunity. By God, say you're the baddest son of a bitch out there. And the guy's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll do that. And he got boxing gloves on. Takedowns are legal. It just wasn't well thought out. We were still thinking up rules and stuff before we even had the first fight.
So let's talk through, kind of what happened in the tournament. Let's go to round 1.
Let's go to again another thing, because people have talked about, they've had the Dr. Death theory that this was skewed to Dr. Death, putting him in there with a one-eyed guy in Carl Ouellet. No, it wasn't. It was 100% because it had to be. We were talking real money, and we were putting the guys in a situation where guys could get hurt, and unfortunately, a lot of them did. What we did, and we did it in my office, had Savio Vega, who was one of the participants, and put all the names in a brown paper bag, kind of like, like the box of gimmicks that we have where we would reach in there and pull a gimmick out and go, okay, you're going to be the chicken guy with the red top. Yeah. We had a brown paper bag. I wrote everyone's name down on a piece of paper, threw it in the bag, and Savio drew the names. And each name, the first name drawn was the first name on the bracket, and so on and so forth. 100% legitimate, and you can ask Savio Vega how we did that, and he was a participant. If anybody had a problem with it, they could go and talk to him. So that's how the brackets were made. So they weren't matched up in any way, shape, or form. It was 100% random.
Well, that's kind of not what I expected to hear, so that's kind of cool. So let's run through some of the combatants. Steve Blackman, who has been regarded as being a pretty legit badass. Do you have any Blackman anecdotes or stories? There may not be many opportunities for us to talk about Mr. Blackman on a future episode. So fire down. Do you have anything interesting you can offer about him?
Steve Blackman was and is a legit tough guy. Steve is so damn fast. I don't think Steve even realizes how fast he is. I think one of the funniest stories I ever heard was Steve Blackman and John Layfield got into a fight in baggage claim one day. And I get them both together and I'm like, John, what happened? He says, Mr. Prichard, hell, I'd been hit 8 times before I realized I was in a damn fight. and Layfield had just been razzing and ribbing Steve Blackman relentlessly to the point that Blackman just snapped. And as Bradshaw says, he was hit 8 times before he realized he was in a fight. So, and
in this, he is taking on Mark Miro, who had a legitimate amateur boxing background. Catch everybody up to speed on what that looked like.
Well, it was kind of one-sided. Blackman just beat the hell out of him. And by that, Blackman just kept taking Mark down, and there wasn't really anything that Mark could do with him. But Blackman's hands were fast, and Miro was a former boxer, but he was no match for Steve Blackman in the takedown department. And
he won. It's worth mentioning, Miro won a lot of titles in boxing in New York. So he came in.
He was a Golden Gloves champ.
He came in with a pedigree.
Yes.
Bradshaw on the same night takes on Mark Canterbury, who many people remember as Henry O. Godwin, a man and a half. I just saw him recently in Charlotte for the NWA Legends Fan Fest, and that dude is still a monster.
He is.
Catch everybody up on, I don't know when we'll talk about him again, Mr. Henry O. Godwin.
Well, as you said, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He's a big old country boy. He's almost like, you ever seen one of those giant brick mailboxes?
Yes.
Well, that's what Mark Canterbury was like. You couldn't move him unless you hit him with a truck or something like that.
Sure.
And he just was a mountain of a man. And
did he have, as far as you know, any sort of, I know he played football, but did he have any sort of fighting background at all? Legitimate?
Not that I can remember. He just was a big, tough, rugged guy.
You can tell when you meet him, the dude played ball.
Oh yeah. And he's got hands the size of
he's huge. He's
big gorilla paws.
He's larger than Brock Lesnar, which some people listening will argue. I've seen them both recently. He is a large man.
Yes.
This is a fun name that we may never see on the show again. Brackus is here.
God. Brackus.
Let's take a little detour for a minute and catch everybody up about what the plan for this guy was. I remember he actually showed up briefly even in ECW. If memory serves, he was a bodybuilder, but then made his way around WWF and USWA down in Memphis and ECW. But what do you remember about Brackus?
Brackus, his name was Achim Albrecht, and he was a German bodybuilder who I believe Shane McMahon had met at some point, and it impressed Shane the fact that when he walked through a door, he had to turn sideways because his shoulders were so broad. He looked like he was chiseled from stone. Not a lot of athletic ability other than lifting a lot of weight to make his muscles look beautiful. But a really nice guy. And completely out of his league in the Brawl For All. Unfortunately, he was out of his league in the ring too. The business was just not a good fit with Occam, but he was in developmental and looking for something to do with them. And
so if he was in developmental, who helped train him?
My brother Tom did.
Okay. He is taking on Savio Vega, and Savio Vega is maybe one of the unsung heroes of mid-90s WWF. He consistently put on really, really good matches, continues to do a good job, and continue his wrestling legacy in Puerto Rico today. Catch everybody up. Again, I don't know when we're going to tell many of these stories, but I know of one really good Savio Vega story that I would like to ask about, but maybe this isn't the time. Do you want to share anything about Savio now?
Well, Savio was a guy that had a lot of respect in the locker room, and the guys looked at him as a tough guy and a stand-up guy more than anything. But he just had a reputation as a tough guy and a good guy. So he volunteered to be a part of it and willingly stepped up. What's your story?
Well, I know now's not the time, but I really want to talk about the time he and Layfield were wrestling before a pay-per-view in September of 96, in your house mind
That's
games.
Another story. Yeah.
Yeah. ECW's in the front row. That we got to come back to at some point. Let's keep going though. The same night,
all the Twitter fans are going to tweet us and say, "Hey, tell us that story." I promise we're going to get to it.
To put this into perspective, we're talking about July 6th here. For those of you who are keeping up, July 6th, 1998 is the night that Nitro emanated from the Georgia Dome, and Goldberg unified the United States title and the world title by beating Hulk Hogan clean in the middle. So this is a big time in the company. If memory serves, this is also when DX did the Nation of Domination spoof. So that 7-6 episode, big night in wrestling. A name we don't hear very often, Darren Drozdov, also took on Road Warrior Hawk that night. These guys had some issues with the Legion of Doom, and now we're going to put them in a match that you say was completely random. Tell everybody something about Droz, because we probably should do that.
Well, Droz was a football player. He was a nose tackle for the Denver Broncos, and his claim to fame was puking on the football right before it was snapped. A couple times. He could puke on command. And if you ever saw the movie Beyond the Mat, you see Vince in the office, and he goes, "We're gonna call you Puke. Come on, do it. Puke. Trying to get Droz to puke.
He's gonna
he's gonna puke.
I love it.
Yeah. But Vince is a big one for not overacting. And that was a highlight. But Droz was a football player, hell of an athlete, and he was a part of it. He came through our developmental territory, and Tom Prichard also trained him. And probably could have done something if not for the unfortunate accident in a match with D'Lo Brown in Nassau County Coliseum, where they did a spot that they did every night, a running power bomb, and Droz landed wrong on his neck, broke his neck, and has been paralyzed ever since. And it's a real sad story. And
was D'Lo Brown's career ever the same?
I don't know that D'Lo was ever the same.
Yeah.
I know that's a heavy thing to carry on you.
Sure.
And I know that D'Lo had a real hard time with it for a long time. And obviously Droz has lived with it through his life, and is still doing his thing, man.
Very inspirational story.
Shout out to Droz, because I'm sure he listens to our show.
Droz is a very inspirational story. He's always loved hunting, from what I understand, and he now has like an all-terrain wheelchair, so he can still hunt now, which really is just amazing. Shout out to Droz. we don't want to dwell on the negative too much. Let's remember the good times. And this night, he went to a draw with Road Warrior Hawk, who would ultimately have to pull out. And so really Draws is the guy who advances. Road Warrior Hawk at this point, this seems kind of out of character for him to do this. I know he's a badass, but it seems like, based on just reputation, he would have the most to lose out of everybody, I think, who was on the list. But at this point, was it kind of necessary to keep his job, or is that unfair to say?
Who's that, Hawk?
Hawk, it just felt like at the time there was a lot of other stuff going on that maybe he felt a little pressure. I don't know.
And you know what? I was extremely careful to let all these guys know that there was absolutely no pressure to be a part of this. And so there was no pressure from our end. Now, Mike might have put pressure on himself.
Sure.
I would hope he didn't, because, I had guys say yes that did back out. I had guys that said no that later on came back into the deal. So.
Well, you can't do that. Tell us who said yes and then backed out.
Well,
just do it. Come on. That's what this is.
No, Shamrock had initially agreed, but then came back and said, why the hell am I doing this? And I agreed with Ken.
Sure.
I agree with every reason that Ken didn't want to be in it.
He had nothing to gain.
He had zero to gain and everything to lose.
Yes.
And,
Anybody else?
And if he won the damn thing, then really what did he prove there too? And that was my thing. It was like, he's the world's most dangerous man. That's his gimmick. That's who he is. Let's keep that. And I get back into the why I hated the concept.
So give us another name. Who else said their name?
I really don't know off the top of my head. I just remember that it happened.
You really don't?
I really don't.
Okay.
Blackman got hurt, dropped out later on.
Yeah, so let's keep going through round one. We've got Bart Gunn, who I know we're going to talk about quite a lot. He wins a decision against Bob Holly. In my head,
the only guy that Bart Gunn did not knock out.
Yeah, and he won a decision. And Bob has always been presented as a badass. Do you have any fun Bob Holly stories?
Bob Holly, the first time I met Bob Holly was in the Snowball Derby outside of Pensacola, Florida. And I'd gone down to shoot Sparky Plug vignettes.
Oh, my
with
God.
Bob Holly. Hey, my name is Thurman Plug. My friends call me Sparky. That's STP, Sparky Thurman Plug. And we had a blast, but there was a point where Bob lost a race, or the guy bumped him. I forget what it was. Bob jumps out of his car, runs down the racetrack to go after the guy that bumped him and got into a fight. And that was my first introduction to Bob Holly. And I fell in love with him. Stand-up guy. I think a lot of people portrayed Bob Holly as a bully.
You disagree?
Not totally, no. I think Bob might have bullied people sometimes, but Bob was Bob, and Bob was a tough guy, and he was one of the first ones to jump at the opportunity to jump into this deal. And I'll go back even, then we'll get into Bart Gunn, because the very first night that we had the Brawl For All fights, Terry Funk came up to me, and of course Terry was, preaching to the choir. Prichard, I don't understand why you want to do this. These guys are going to get hurt, and there's one guy that's going to win this whole thing. It's that cowboy back there. Gunn, he's going to win the whole damn thing. Before anybody threw a punch.
Wow.
Before a single takedown was done. Before the bell rang for one fight, Terry Funk said Bart Gunn would beat everybody.
Where did that come from? Had they even worked together?
They had not, and it came from an old Texas cowboy in Terry Funk looking across the locker room at a raw-boned badass in Bart Gunn, and Bart's got a big scar that goes across his belly, And Terry, just kind of sized him up. He says, you look at the scars on that man. He's been through some tough things. And Bart was a quiet, very unassuming guy. And Terry just saw what was inside. Saw what a lot of people didn't.
All right, let's take a quick time out here to talk about our friends over at ProWrestlingTees.com/Bruce Prichard. I've got a confession to make right now, Bruce. I ordered my daughter Kansas the Love shirt, which is phenomenal. It's got the red shirt with the white tie and the white suit jacket and the red pocket square and the carnation and the white suspenders. It's everything you need to know that, hey, I'm trying to be formal, but I like to party. So I bought that for Kansas, a month ago, but I finally broke down and I got one too.
Well, of course you did, because you just never know when you're going to need to heed that call and let somebody know you love them. But you know what? Just because you love somebody doesn't necessarily have to mean that you like somebody. And if that's how you feel, I've got a t-shirt for that too. And if you really dig this show, we've got a Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard t-shirt for that. And I got one of like every character I've ever done. And the best is still yet to come. New designs coming. I hope to be able to make that announcement next week, but it's at Pro Wrestling Tees /Bruce Prichard. Do not put a T in my name. And check out all the great t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com.
Don't put a T in his name. Put a T on your back. You're going to love the way you look in this t-shirt. And we're going to love you if you buy the official Something to Wrestle With t-shirt. Let all your wrestling friends know you know what's going on. You know where the hottest podcast is. It's right here on MLW Radio. Now back to more Something to Wrestle With. So let's go back to Bob Holly just for a minute, because I don't know when we'll talk about him again. He beat the shit out of a kid on the Your Reality show, Tough Enough. And he's gotten a lot of stuff over the years because of it. Do you want to talk about that or address that at all?
I honestly don't remember it. It was Matt Capitelli.
That's right.
Right? I don't remember it.
Well,
so I remember the incident, but I think it was one of those deals where the producers told him to do it, and Bob kind of, got out of hand. I don't know though. So to comment on it, I don't really remember it. You'll have to show it to me one day. And
you just set the internet on fire, because
Why?
That's what I hoped you would say. Because I had a suspicion that this was not necessarily the shoot that everybody thought it was.
They wouldn't have aired it if it was.
Matt and Bob knew what was going on, and maybe it just went a little far.
I believe that.
Okay.
That's what, if I was to make an educated guess, that's what I would say happened.
So there you go. Everybody who thinks that Bob Holly is a bully.
I don't think, no, Bob wouldn't do that. Now, Bob may perpetrate that. Makes you think he was going to do that.
Sure. Well, it's good. It's good for business, so to speak.
Yeah. But Bob's not an asshole. He's really not.
Quebecer Pierre, taking on Dr. Death, Steve Williams. You want to say anything here? Steve Williams wins by TKO. I'm going to let you take it.
Well, it was Dr. Death fighting a one-eyed man. Pierre Carl Ouellet, only has one eye. The other eye is glass eye. He only has one eye. Now, you talk about an inspiration. This guy learned how to throw and catch a baseball as a kid.
Right.
He's got great hand-eye coordination. So, and he would always throw that back at us. The things that he has done, only having one eye, are truly amazing.
Right.
And so he had no problem at all stepping into this and doing it. But Dr. Death, with his pedigree, it was what it was. Wasn't pretty.
Okay. The Godfather and Dan Severn. The Godfather is universally respected in the locker room. Somebody who carries a lot of weight. I think everybody listening knows that Dan Severn was a legit UFC badass. Tell everybody a little bit about Godfather, because some people just know him as Papa Shango or whatever. Tell everybody a little bit about the real Papa, the real Charles Wright.
Bear, Charles Wright, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, and a legit tough guy, bouncer, tough guy. I don't know. He may have. So I don't know if Bear had any amateur training, but you're in there with a guy, Dan Severin, who has been in hundreds of these at that point. And Dan was a master of takedowns. Dan was a hell of a wrestler in his day. And just, that one wasn't pretty either.
He played football. He was famous for being a bouncer in Las Vegas. You can still see him there now. He's still out there.
He's a GM at Cheetahs.
So go see him. Disco Inferno also works at a strip club in Las Vegas. So if you're a wrestling fan and you enjoy the ballet or the shoe show, you got lots going on in Las Vegas. The other one is 8-Ball and Scorpio. The Harris brothers may or may not own part of TNA now. Tell everybody a little bit about 8-Ball. I think most everybody knows about Scorpio, but we should touch on him too.
Well, who the hell was 8-Ball? Was that Ronnie or Donnie?
I believe
they're interchangeable. And again,
well, they're identical twins. Who could tell them apart?
They are. And both great. The bad thing about this tournament is everybody in it, you couldn't ask for a nicer bunch of guys.
Right.
When you group the guys as far as, okay, there wasn't one asshole in the bunch.
Right.
So that also kind of sucks. Because you have nobody to root for, really. Like, I hope that guy gets his dick knocked stiff. You hate to see your friends fight, and that's what it was. But I don't, again, I try to forget the Brawl for All sometimes. The majority of it, there are high spots I remember.
Well, let's refresh everybody's memory then. Let's go ahead and get into the next round, round 2. Mark Mero is now taking on Bradshaw, and Bradshaw had beat Henry O'Godwin. Mark Mero actually loses to Steve Blackman, but Mero advances because Blackman couldn't continue. Right. Bradshaw wins that one, goes to the semifinals, and he'll be facing the winner of Savio Vega, Darren Drozdoff. Drozdoff will go on to beat Vega by points. So that sets up the semis for the top of the bracket, which will be Bradshaw and Droz. Towards the bottom of the tier here, we see Bart Gunn, who won a decision over Bob Holly. He's moving forward against Dr. Death Steve Williams. We're going to circle back to that one. And then Godfather actually lost to Dan Severin. Severin withdrew from the competition, so Godfather advanced. So the integrity of this thing has already gone to hell. And Scorpio, who did win, is now taking on Godfather. So... and I forgot to mention a minute ago, there was a draw with Hawk and Drozdoff. Hawk is not able to continue, I believe, because of injury. How do you remember that?
I think it was an injury, yeah.
So
Droz, of course, got injured after it too. But
sure. So Mero and Bradshaw, that one winds up in Bradshaw's hat. Did you see that one coming, or did you think that Mero would get beat twice here now, even though he was Golden Gloves?
Well, that was a hotly disputed finish. I think especially if you would have asked Mark Merrill at the time, we had judges. We had Danny Hodge, who's a respected old timer, great, probably one of the toughest all around wrestlers ever to lace up a pair of boots. First wrestler ever to be on Sports Illustrated. And Danny Hodge was a wrestler and a boxer back in the day.
Famous for crushing apples
Perry, Oklahoma.
And wrenches and incredible hand strength, double tendons.
Victor Quinones was another judge, and Victor was a promoter out of Puerto Rico and also promoted in Japan. And we had them judging. Okay, and they judge however many points for however many punches were landed, and then you got so many points for takedowns.
Wasn't Gorilla Monsoon a judge too?
He may have been, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we should, I don't know that we necessarily talked about that, but each match is 3 1-minute rounds. So even though the UFC, it's 5-minute rounds, that's not really what these guys were conditioned for. So it was 3 1-minute rounds. So if they went all 3 rounds without a knockout, it would be a 3-minute fight. And they're scoring based on punches per round, a clean takedown, a knockdown, or obviously a knockout would end it.
Right.
But those points were supposed to be most punches gets 5 points, a takedown gets 5 points, a knockdown gets 10. And of course, if you knock him out, you win. So now, Miro has lost 2 in a row. Bradshaw's in the semifinals. He's taking on Draws, who beat Savio Vega. Godfather gets the win over Scorpio. So even though Godfather lost to Severin, it's the ultimate comeback story for the Godfather, and he's going to advance. And he takes on the winner of Bart Gunn and Steve Williams. And I want to talk about this because Bob Holly has come out, and I want you to poke holes in this, and said that Dr. Death had already been paid the $100,000 prize money before he fought Bart Gunn.
Absolutely not true. No truth to that whatsoever.
Okay.
That's not to say that the boys didn't say that. That's probably not to say I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Death said that, but that is absolutely 100% false and not true.
So,
and the story I remember from the whole Bart Gunn Dr. Death match, Bart Gunn called me the week before the fight happened. And he said, I have a question for you. I said, yeah. He says, well, I know that this tournament, this whole Brawl for All thing is a launching pad for Dr. Death. Am I going to get in any trouble if I knock him out?
Wow.
And I laughed and I said, well, first of all, it's in the launching pad for anybody other than whoever wins the damn thing.
So you were still keeping kayfabe with him then?
I'm not keeping kayfabe. That's what it was. So you make it sound like I'm lying to him, and I'm not.
Well, I'm just saying.
I'm strictly telling him
JR
that
said
whoever
he'll walk
wins
through
the
that
thing.
wall. He walked through that wall right now.
Well, no, one man's opinion.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, but that's what everybody thinks.
I know.
And it's just simply not true. So Bart calls me and says, well, I get in trouble if I knock him out. And I laughed. And I said, no, you won't get in trouble at all. He says, well, I know that, it's JR's boy. I said, well, how do you know that, I said, did anybody tell you that you were going over in your first fight? Well, no. I said, well, we didn't tell anybody else either. And I am telling you right now. And if you want to sit down with Vince and me and Jim Ross and Dr. Death and everybody in a room and say, hey, man, this is the deal. Go out and do everything you can to beat each other. We can do that. He says, no, I just want your assurance I'm not going to get in trouble when I knock him out. Bart's words. I said, I promise you will not get in trouble. And of course, I hang up the phone and I go in and I let JR know, and JR laughed and thought that it was ridiculous that Bart would think that. Vince loved it, thought it was great, wanted to see it, and we all saw it.
When you guys were these fights are happening, are you in the gorilla position when this is happening?
Yes.
Are you watching it on a headset? And if so, who is sitting beside you?
Well, I watched it on a monitor. I listened to it on a headset.
Come on, asshole. Who's sitting by you?
It could be any number of people, probably like Jerry Briscoe or whoever. I don't know.
Are you getting any sort of reaction from Vince?
For those, was Vince doing commentary or?
Well, here's the thing. If you don't remember, then that answers my question.
I don't.
So Bart Gunn knocks out Steve Williams. I think he tears an ACL or MCL in the process.
Oh man, he tore his hamstring.
Okay.
Doc tore his hamstring bad. And again, another reason why this was just an ill-conceived shit idea. Because you take a guy that we have signed to a contract for decent money, and you put him in a situation that's not controlled, and he's out for 6 months. Because somebody wanted to do something to shut up a wrestler who was a big mouth in the locker room. Oh, God forbid somebody has a big mouth in the locker room. I know what we'll do. We'll put and let them beat the hell out of each other, and a bunch of people get hurt. It's just stupid. Anyway, go ahead.
It's worth mentioning. No,
am I on a rant?
I like when you get on a rant here. It's worth mentioning that Savio Vega, after his loss here, he suffered an injury. He never wrestled again.
Neck injury, never wrestled again.
Not for WWF.
He did wrestle again,
but not for y'all.
But he was never the same again, and still to this day has neck issues.
He does ultimately. I don't remember. Clear this up. Does Dr. Death wrestle for you guys again? I know the next year,
yes.
A year later, he is.
Yes.
He's on WCW, and they did the whole Oklahoma spoof. Did everything just kind of go to hell in a handbasket after that?
Yeah, it just didn't click, didn't work.
Okay.
And Doc was never the same after that injury. You know, you're built up to be this Superman, and in a shoot, you get knocked out. It just completely destroys that Superman persona, because that's all people remember.
Right.
Now, keep in mind, anybody on any given day can get knocked out by pretty much anybody else, walking the earth. So, but people don't, the armchair quarterbacks like to sit back and, oh, he's not so tough after all. But it didn't do a lot for the Dr. Death persona.
So now we've got the semifinals, Bradshaw versus Drozdoff. Bradshaw wins, goes on to the main event. He wins on points. Bart Gunn fights the Godfather. He knocks him out too. So Bart Gunn now's on a little bit of a tear. He beat Bob Holly by points. Then he knocks out Dr. Death. Now he knocks out the Godfather. So our main event is set. The finals, it's going to be 8/24. August 24th is what we're looking at here. So this thing started about 2 months ago now, because it started at the end of June, and Bart Gunn knocks out Bradshaw, and supposedly there's a, so I want you to kind of clear this up. The word is Bart Gunn got $75,000 for winning the tournament. Bradshaw got $25,000. Is that the way you remember it?
Yes. And they each got, I think it was $5,000 if they won a match in the
prelims,
in the fights coming up. Yeah. And the other one got 25, something like that.
So now when this is all done, let's talk about the aftermath. Mark Merrill wasn't with the company very, very much longer. I think he was gone in about a year. Henry O'Godwin, kind of the same fate. Blackman was around, for 5 more years, maybe. Brackus was gone pretty much in short order and, just disappeared. We know what happened with Draws. He was injured. Hawk wasn't around too much longer. He was gone. Bob Holly was around forever. We're going to come back to Bart Gunn. Dr. Death, you said he wrestled again for you guys. What do you remember him doing, and what led to his departure from the WWF?
Just not clicking. Just not really being, just not clicking with the audience. When unfortunately, sometimes what happens is if you are promoted to death with a talent, or you promo a talent to death, it will come back to bite that talent in the rear end. So if there's anybody that, is plugging for talent A so hard, and then talent A comes in and stumbles on their way to the ring, it gives 40 different people in the backstage area an excuse now. Say, see, he stumbled. He's no good. He's not what everybody said he was. And I think that's what happened to Doc.
Right.
And it wasn't, in my opinion, first of all, I don't think it was a fair debut for him. I don't think it was the right way to showcase Dr. Death. And when Doc came back later on, I don't feel that he was portrayed in a light that would enable him to get over and connect with the audience.
So let's talk about,
it was a false start when he came back, and it just didn't work. And I think the opportunity was for Doc to go back to Japan and do other things and let him go make the money.
And he went to WCW.
Yes.
So let's talk about an unintended consequence here. The goal certainly was to get the winner over as a huge star, not a huge star, but level him up, put some shine on him, give him some focus, give him some new legs. But I feel like Bradshaw comes out of this thing looking better than almost everybody else, even though he got knocked out in the finals, because he would be the guy who ultimately went on to be the WWF champion or WWE champion. That didn't happen.
Well, that certainly wasn't because of the Brawl for All, I guarantee you.
Well, my point is, you guys unceremoniously buried Bart Gunn, and I can't wait to hear whose idea it was to put him in the ring with Butterbean the next year. So to recap, it's the end of August. I know you're making a weird face at me. It's the end of August. You wanted to get this guy over and make him somebody. So you immediately, coming out of this on the end of August, start programming him against Bob Holly, who was now going by Hardcore Holly. And, they're, having a feud about pushing each other off the stage and lots of craziness. It doesn't really ever go anywhere or do much. But then somehow, several months later, well, hell, he's a badass. Let's let him fight Butterbean. Whose idea is this?
I think it was a culmination of a lot of people. The gentleman who trained Mark Merrow's trainer, Ray something, real nice guy from Buffalo, New York, who saw something in Bart and felt that he could make a professional boxer out of Bart.
Ray Rinaldi is the name you're
Ray
looking
Rinaldi,
for.
yes. Yeah. Just a sweetheart of a guy. And the idea came up, well, is there somebody out there that, Bart could box in a feature? Who's a name? Obviously you're not going to put him against Mike Tyson or anybody like that because, that wouldn't last 5 seconds instead of however many seconds the other one lasted.
35.
But yeah, I was going to say 37. But it was simply a case of, well, hell, the shoot aspect worked for Bart. Well, let's keep that same thing going. And it didn't, to me, it was a failed experiment. You win some, you lose some. I've had plenty of them, but it just was a bad idea. And the bad idea just kept getting worse. And we looked for a name, and we had done work with Butterbean and Butterbean's manager, Art Donovan, before. So Ray knew Art, we knew Art, and the phone calls were made asking Butterbean if he would be interested in doing the Brawl For All deal.
Can you freestyle what his payday may have been for that?
Whose?
Butterbean's.
God, I don't remember, man.
So you said whose, so that means you know Bart Gunn's. What did Bart Gunn get to fight Butterbean?
Oh, I don't know that. Dude, it was WrestleMania. I don't know. I don't remember everybody's payoff.
Well, I say whose payday, what was his payday, and you say who, and then neither
you said
guy.
Who? Pronouns, pal. Goddamn, pal. Pronouns.
Well, you knew neither one, so what did it matter which one I'm talking about?
Well, okay, no, neither. No.
Okay.
Hey, folks, can you tell that we really and truly don't rehearse this stuff?
Well, it's better.
Free form just talking about this on the air. So it's good. I like it. I never know what Conrad's going to throw at me. He never knows how the hell I'm going to answer. But it works somehow. That's why you get on Twitter and say, you forgot about on April 9th at 12:47 p.m. So-and-so said this. Okay, sorry.
Well, yeah, we freestyled it, and we had a good time talking about the Brawl For All. One question that
you want to talk about the Butterbean fight?
Yeah, I would love to. I feel like the Butterbean fight is really part of Brawl For All. I know it's not, but it's certainly the cherry on top.
Yeah, it is. It was just another ill-conceived idea, but Bart trained hard for it. And he went up and trained with Ray Rinaldi and busted his ass, really preparing for the fight. But Butterbean's a super heavyweight who doesn't get paid by the hour, gets paid to go out and knock guys out. And that's what Butterbean does. And I know that a lot of people would consider Butterbean a sideshow. But
he didn't look like one that day.
Yeah, I've never seen him look like one in the ring. I mean, he's a tough son of a gun. And Bean even came to us and said, hey, what do you want me to do? I said,
Whoa. So you're saying Bean was willing to work a little bit?
Bean was willing to work. I don't think Bean would have been willing to lose, but Bean was willing to work. And
okay, this begs the question.
What's that?
Why don't y'all just pay him?
Pay who?
Butterbean.
Bean? To lose?
Yeah.
Because the idiotic idea of, well, let's make it real, it'll mean something. No, it doesn't in a make-believe world. You're right. Why not pay Bean to lose? I don't know that Bean would have agreed to lose. But
you could have gotten somebody to agree to lose.
Sure, exactly, to build Bart.
Yeah, I just don't get that. I mean, I know. Well,
there was so much there was so much, well, wow, I didn't see that in Bart Gunn, and well, maybe he's the real deal. Maybe he can have a career in boxing. Maybe he could do this. Well, Butterbean, and people thinking that Bean wasn't a legit boxer because all he did was tough man stuff. It's different. It's different when you box all the time and all you do is train to knock somebody's head off. It's different than when you do other things and you learn how to throw a few punches. I trained in karate, and I was a decent point fighter when I was much, much, much younger. And I hit hard. So the idea was, well, he hits hard, but I hit hard for a point fighter. So we'll try full contact. And I went and trained. And at the time, they were getting boxers involved. And the boxers, you only had to throw like 12 kicks, I think, per round. So the boxers would learn how to throw a roundhouse, throw their 12 kicks, and then just take your head off. Well, training with boxers for a few months who all they do is punch your face in, I was like, forget this, man. This hurts. It's a completely different world when you're used to working. And think about the guys that he faced in the Brawl For All. They weren't boxers.
Right.
Tough guys. But if anybody was a boxer, Merrow was. But
right.
Again, Merrow hadn't boxed in years.
Right.
And now you're facing a guy, that's all he does. Ill-conceived idea.
It's just interesting to me. This is a time where you guys are, you have like the Ministry of Darkness and you're setting crosses on fire and you're kidnapping people and hitting them with cars.
Never set a cross on fire.
Okay, set a symbol on fire. Sorry. But that's okay. We got to make this real. And in the end, real didn't work out for the WWF. Real didn't work out for Bart Gunn or anybody who was involved. The only person who goes on to have considerable success with the WWE is Mr. Bradshaw. Anything else you want to mention on this? I guess the one thing I really want to ask is, man, why didn't you guys just shit can this idea like a weekend?
Oh, God, I would have loved to shit can it. It was horrible.
Y'all didn't talk about that ever? Like, let's just can it. Like, this isn't working.
Man, I got my ass chewed out so bad that, this may be a reoccurring theme on the show about me getting my ass chewed out. I got my ass chewed out so bad for being negative when presented the idea. I just kept my mouth shut from that point forward, going, okay. I've stated my case. I've said it's a horrible idea. I hate it. I'm on record. Everybody knows I hate it. Next.
So in the end, did Vince ever come?
In the end, JR and I had to deal with all the injuries, and it costs a lot of money to the company having to pay for rehab and getting these guys taken care of and time off from work. So, yeah, it costs us a lot of money, and JR and I are the ones that had to deal with the fallout.
But what was Vince saying in the meantime? Like, in between week to week, you guys aren't doing all this in one night. It's a 2-month deal. Is Vince still, goddamn, pal, don't be negative? Or what's the deal? In my head, he's got to be realistic with this.
Yeah, he's going to defend the idea. Vince is going to stay positive and defend the idea and try and convince everybody it's the right thing to do.
So right now,
if we had
see
through to the end,
if we had Vince McMahon here, even though Cornette said it was a bad idea, Layfield said it was a bad idea.
Layfield didn't say it was a bad idea. Who said that?
Well, I just assumed that he probably felt it was a bad idea.
I don't think he cared.
Okay.
I think that the talent that were in it, I don't know that many of them thought it was a horrible idea before it happened. Guys that weren't in it thought it was a terrible idea. I'd venture to say Austin probably thought it was a terrible idea. Those guys probably thought it was a terrible idea.
Well, so I'm asking though, do you think if Vince was here right now, he would say it was a bad idea? Or do you think he would still defend it?
I think he'd say it was a bad idea. I think everyone involved would say it was a bad idea.
If you had it to do over again, would you book this same concept except work the whole thing?
Nope. Terrible concept.
Just wouldn't do it at all.
Wouldn't do it at all.
How's it any different? 1-minute rounds, 3 1-minute rounds, judges, blah, blah, blah. How's it any different if you work it than just working a wrestling match?
Because it wasn't good. Yeah, you want to watch boxing or MMA? Go watch boxing and MMA.
Just so I'm clear, you were involved in booking Mayweather Big Show at WrestleMania, right?
Yeah, I was.
And WWE did promote.
It was a wrestling match.
Booker T did promote, or not Booker T, Mr. T did fight Roddy Piper at WrestleMania, right?
Yes, that was a work.
So why not do that?
It wasn't a tournament, and it didn't eat up a ton of television time, and it was a huge television star in Mr. T.
And these guys, it's important to mention, there were chants during these contests, boring and we want wrestling.
Correct.
And Vince still thought, gotta see it through, pal.
We were in it. Got to finish it.
Anything you want to say to put a bow on the Brawl For All as we kind of wrap things up
Worst
here?
idea in wrestling. I just thought it was terrible. I've been on my soapbox. And again, for everybody that's going to go, oh yeah, what about this? Yes, I had a lot of terrible ideas, but this had to be the worst of my, just, it was bad. There were just so many bad ramifications. I'm glad it's over, and at least it gives us something to talk about today.
I got to be honest. I did an interview with Vince Russo last year for the Ric Flair show, or I guess it was called Woo Nation at the time. And I had an opportunity to talk to Vince before, during, and after the show. And I found Vince to be not what everybody made him out to be. You were a lot easier on Vince Russo today than I expected. It seems like old-time wrestling guys, people who've been around the business a long time, really brutalize him. But in this instance, you're just saying it was a bad idea. You're not so much heaping it all on Vince Russo.
You can't. Vince McMahon approved it. Vince McMahon approved it. Look, here's the deal. For those who want to bitch about Russo killing the business and all the things, Vince approved it. Now, it's funny. Russo will go, okay, no, I was responsible for this, that, and the other thing. But the bad idea, well, that was Vince McMahon. No, it was Vince McMahon, the good and the bad. Vince McMahon was the filter. Vince McMahon is the end all be all. The buck stops there. He's either going to approve it or not approve it. So it all comes down to the blame goes to Vince McMahon. It may have been Russo's idea, but Vince approved it and went with it.
Well, and we went with it this week. We talked about Brawl For All in more depth than anybody's ever going to cover. We got more than an hour today.
Sorry about that.
All these matches combined, you could have watched in the amount of time we've spent talking on it. I would encourage you to do so, but it was all really bad, so I can't recommend it. All right, Bruce, so that kind of concludes our Brawl For All talk today. And if you have a hot topic for us, you need to be sure to follow us on Twitter. That's at Prichard Show. We put up a poll during Raw this week, and we're going to put up a poll during Raw every week. The only way to kind of dictate what happens on the show, throw us a follow. It's at Prichard Show. You'll see both of our individual handles there, but we want your input. You get to shape the show. So if you want to know what happened when, just go to at Prichard Show on Twitter, and we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
The world of MLW Radio never stops.